Um, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session, this morning hub session on monetizing flexibility. My name is Jérôme Lepage. I'm the director for European electricity markets at EFET, the European Federation of Energy Traders. Just practicalities before we start. I understand that the speakers around the room are not necessarily very strong, so I recommend that you go to the hostesses on the side to get a headset to make sure that you can listen properly to the presentations and to the panel discussion after that. So welcome again. The EU Utility Week this year is not only talking about utilities and their evolution, but also markets and how all this intertwines. And we're quite happy at EFET to be partnering again and endorsing this event. This morning's session, so we'll have 3 hours of discussions, presentations, and simulations also, trading games. We'll start with 3 presentations this morning. The first one will be by Todd Williams, who's the managing director of Navigant. It's a consulting company, and he's going to talk to us about the challenges of designing a flexibility market. This will be followed by 2 other presentations by Remco Franken from Priogen and Volker Dragon from Siemens. Around 11, we will have a 45-minute panel discussion with a number of speakers that I will introduce later on. And we'll end the morning with a simulation around flexibility market design presented by our friends of USEF. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Todd for his presentation on flexibility market design. The floor is yours.
No. Oh, high tech. All right. There we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about challenges in flexibility markets, and I have deliberately chosen, I think, a somewhat provocative title. And the title is, The Challenge, I Think, is the Enemy Within. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of discussion about flexibility market design, and I know that discussion will go on. I guess it's actually flexibility markets, plural, is I guess the best way to think about it. But there's going to be a lot of discussion about flexibility market design. And in my view, the 3 things that we need to have an effective flexibility market that will provide maximum value to customers is, firstly, careful market design. Secondly, innovation from service providers, aggregators and service providers. And thirdly, innovation from energy companies. And if you sort of look at those 3, we know there's a lot of discussion on market design, and we know there's a lot of toing and froing in terms of this way versus that way. That discussion, that debate will continue. And I'm confident that we will have good design coming out of that, good designs coming out of that. I'm also confident that there's a lot of innovation in terms of service providers. There's a lot of great ideas out there. There was been a lot of startup discussions already here at this conference. I think there's a lot of great ideas out there. No lack of great ideas. I think the key challenge will be how rapidly energy companies can activate and facilitate flexibility markets. And this is not surprising when we look at sort of where energy companies come from. They typically, if you look at sort of the technology innovation sort of value chain, technology companies usually, or energy companies usually focus sort of in that, on the right-hand side of the chart to the left there, in terms of level 7, 8, 9, 10, that is focused on technology validation, technology demonstration, commercialization, and also deployment. That's not surprising, and that's appropriate given the role of energy companies. What's also interesting is the R&D activity for energy companies has typically been relatively low, say 1% of their spend. And if you compare that with a lot of other companies, and I'll just pick the two companies at the sector at the top, software and internet, and also third down, computing and electronics. I mean, they spend a lot more, 5, 10, even more than 10% of their costs are related to R&D. And I think that the flexibility markets are more akin to sort of software, internet, computing, and electronics than the traditional energy model. And for that reason, I think there's a need for greater innovation within the energy companies. The concept that we at Navigant call the energy cloud, I think others would call it the energy transition. There's a whole bunch of names, 3Ds, 4Ds, what have you. I think we all agree that it's coming. We can debate when it's going to come, whether it's here today, but ultimately we see a market that is much more complex, involving a lot of two-way power flows, involving integration of technology, business models, with a convergence of technology, data, energy, and frankly, a lot shorter life cycle for things compared to sort of typically 40-year assets that we might find on the networks. That change in the energy industry will require greater innovation, and it will require a more focus on products and markets and customers, frankly. And specifically, what I think it will need is it's going to require work in terms of digital and platform products. It will require work in terms of IT-OT convergence, and we're seeing that today. New product practices, industrialized development of those, a more open organization, and also just generally a cultural shift more towards customers and markets from sort of an inward focus. These are the changes that I believe are going to be required in order to succeed in the energy cloud and also in order to offer effective flexibility markets. Now, it's not just me. I think there are a lot of utilities that are recognizing, a lot of energy companies that are recognizing this is a challenge, and they are taking efforts to address these. And we looked at, just to get a better handle on it, we looked at what 6 energy companies are doing with respect to innovation. So we looked at Enel, E.ON, Energy, also DEWA, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, CLP, China Light and Power, and also Schneider Electric. Now these are sort of a relatively random grab, and we're not saying that these are better than any others, but these, we were aware, did make a concerted effort to look at innovation. So we looked at their innovation practices in terms of size, whether it's number of employees focused on innovation, if their budget information with respect to innovation was available, how much they spend on venture capital, and what are the specific areas they're focused on in terms of innovation. From that, we drew a number of key messages, and I won't read them. They're sort of listed across the bottom there. But what's interesting about this is that they've all done something unique in terms of innovation. They've all taken steps towards innovation, and they've all focused on areas that I guess are appropriate for them in terms of their future strategy. And they're taking a slightly different tack in terms of what makes sense for them. Very interesting. So when we took this information from energy company research that we did, and we combined it from research in terms of just general innovation across all industries, what we came up with were, I would say, seven leading practices for innovation. And if we start in the top left, there's 7, and I'll just go anti-clockwise. The first thing that you have to do, and this is not surprising, is you have to stimulate. You have to stimulate innovation. You have to encourage your employees and your partners to be innovative. The second thing is this takes money. I mean, it doesn't happen for free. You have to make an investment in this. And so this is what we saw from the 6 companies we looked at, and this is what we saw from the lessons from other practices globally. The third thing is that innovation doesn't happen overnight. You can't just snap your fingers and say, oh, I've got an innovative, I've got a whole lot of innovation. It takes time. And you have to be patient in terms of incubating these innovative ideas. Some work, some won't work, but you have to be patient. Fourthly, innovation is great, and if I have an innovation in my head, it's only good to me. If I can deploy that broadly across my industry, across my company, then it's going to create a lot more value. So there's absolutely best practices in terms of deployment of innovation. And we absolutely see that being a challenge in a lot of our energy company clients, is this question about deployment. The fifth one we've labeled as orchestration. And I guess the way to think about this is, think about it as I've got an ecosystem of a bunch of people and a bunch of entities that want to be innovative. How do you coordinate across that? How do you make that ecosystem sort of work together to maximize the innovation that would come from that? So that's the orchestration concept. The sixth one is to capture the fact that creativity and innovation can be taught. So in some cases, people are sort of led down a path, and maybe there's a risk-free or low-risk aversion, conservative view that they might become a habit. But that doesn't mean that they cannot sort of take off the shackles and be creative. And I think a lot of us want to be creative and want to think about new things. So there is a best practice with respect to developing those capabilities and that mindset within your employees. And lastly, think about functional spaces. So some of us have, maybe we have sort of plain offices and it doesn't really lend itself to creativity, and there's not a lot of white space, whiteboards to draw ideas on. You absolutely have to create that functional space that will encourage creativity. So these are the 7 practices that we found that led to successful innovation. What I'd like to do now is to talk about an example of work that Navigant has done in New York State, that actually leveraged 4 of those practices that I've referred to. And the first is stimulate, the second one is incubate, orchestrate, and develop the capabilities and the mindset. So this work that we're doing with the New York utilities and energy companies called Rev Connect, it actually leverages those 4 areas. I don't know, is anyone familiar with the New York Reforming the Energy Vision? Put your hands up if you are. Okay? So there's a few of you, but I would say that New York, and this is a credit to the governor of New York, the governor of New York said, I think the governor saw the energy cloud, he might have seen our picture of it or someone else's picture of it, and he said, I realize that that's where we're going, and I realize we have a problem and that we have to change our industry. So this came from the very top politically, and so there's been this whole process called Reforming the Energy Vision, or New York Rev, REV, spawned by the governor. Navigant has been involved, working with the utilities there, focused on innovation, and the essence of it is Rev Connect. The name Rev Connect is connecting the innovation, the sort of aggregators and the service providers with the utilities. That's our job, and we've been working with them for 2 years on that. So kudos to New York to recognize that. I mean, their system is different than here. Different, I would say, broadly similar objectives with maybe a slightly different market construct. Let's just say that. But they recognize they need to go there, and it's driven from the top. So the idea is that New York Rev Connect links the energy companies with the service providers to try to get them to work better together. And also what it does is it ultimately provides value for the customer, the utility, and the service provider. So that's, the idea is we provide that sort of, help them connect what's that sort of win-win-win innovation practice that they could apply idea. And it also helps, I think it helps, in our experience, it helps the utilities with them becoming more innovative and also just generally collaboration in the sector. We've worked with them on a number of different approaches in terms of this Rev Connect concept. And one of the ones that we've had, I would say, the most success with over the couple of years that we've been working with them is this innovation sprint process. And what this process is it, again, the whole idea of Rev Connect is to connect energy companies with service providers. And the way this innovation sprint works is it's time bound. So there's a time limit on this. You can't just continue to do this forever. We try to focus it in terms of hence the name sprint. and what it does is it accelerates that innovation process. So it doesn't take years. It should take months. In fact, possibly weeks. So at the start of the process, on the left side, first step is a kickoff. So we have a webinar, and we invite all of the potential submitters. So we say, this is the focus of this innovation sprint, topic X. And we have a discussion, say what we're looking for. The submitters are free to submit their ideas in response to that theme, whatever that theme was. Then we facilitate discussions between the suppliers and the energy companies. And do not underestimate the importance of that task, because what we found is that oftentimes the energy companies and the service providers speak a different language. And it's not that they don't speak English or French or German, or it's that they speak a different language in terms of understanding of the system. So the energy company will say, this is what I'm looking for in my system. And the solution providers will say, oh, I'm talking about IT or whatever it is. And they're talking at cross purposes a lot. So this facilitation third step in this process, is critical because we get them all speaking the same language. And it's amazing once there's a lot of, oh, aha, now I know what you need. Oh, aha, now I know how that system works. I know what you can do for me. So that process allows then the solution providers to better articulate their offer. So here's how it would help, here's how it would provide, in the case of today's discussion, here's the way it can support flexibility in your local market. At that point, then, there's a one-on-one discussion with the most promising ideas, and they get feedback. So here's what I like about your idea, here's what I don't like, here's what would make it better. And at that point, the last step is that those most promising ideas would process through into business case or a demo, some sort of pilot, and possibly other partnership. So there's a lot of flexibility in this process at the back end. The back end isn't necessarily prescribed, but sort of what will flow from it will kind of flow naturally from the process. So we've had a lot of success with this in New York, and here's just one example. In the summer, last summer, we launched, excuse me, we launched an innovation sprint that was focused on innovative energy efficiency. And we had more than 60 ideas submitted. So think back to that, this previous, if I go back. So 60 ideas at the front end of this were submitted in step 2. We worked through that process, and we came up with a number of I think very leading business models with respect to energy efficiency, and just some examples are shown here. So the first one was, on the left side, a shared savings model that leveraged third-party capital. And I think if you're familiar with energy efficiency, I think you'd appreciate that access to capital is a critical barrier to energy efficiency. So what we found were, we had a solution provider that came up with this idea, good idea, and this is the idea, so this idea is being further developed, frankly, as we speak. Just one example. The next one was between a sort of a utility and a service provider a pay-for-performance contract. So from the energy company's perspective, they'd rather just pay on delivery, and the solution provider, ideally, would be paid up front or paid some way that might not match performance. But this is an innovative business model that was developed and frankly sort of negotiated informally through this process, and it allows the two parties to get closer. And so when they finally have any sort of talking about a demonstration or talking about some sort of partnership, they're all on the same page. And then the third one was leveraging utility data, and this I believe would be sort of smart meter data through their AMI system, but looking at that to identify areas of system value, and also where can customer segmentation and potential customer acquisition for energy efficiency opportunities arise. So again, just 3 examples. There were 60 submitted in this particular sprint. 3 examples of, I think, successful innovation. So this process does work, and we've had a lot of success with it. And I would say, certainly, I think when I look at what's needed in terms of flexibility, when I look at what's needed in terms of innovation, I believe that certainly encouraged by what energy companies are doing in terms of innovation, but a process like this that we've deployed successfully, I think there can be merits in looking at approaches like this here in Europe. So, in summary, I think it's absolutely the focus that we have now in terms of flexibility market design is absolutely appropriate and certainly timely. Some may say it's, we could have done it sooner, but it is what it is. But we know there's going to be a lot of discussion on flexibility markets. I'm confident that those markets, the design will be robust. There's a lot of debate back and forth. That's, to me, a good process. And we will have good, robust market designs coming from that. I'm also confident that there's a lot of innovative service providers out there with a lot of great ideas that will contribute to flexibility. You're looking for flexibility? Look to the market. I think there's a lot of great ideas in the market. I have no worries about that. What I do think is a challenge is that energy companies, even when they recognize that they have some innovation challenges, there is a question about how rapidly they can activate these flexibility markets. So we can have good market design, we can have a lot of providers, but there's a potential risk that the energy companies may not be sort of as quick moving as perhaps they could be. And so innovation does not necessarily come naturally to them, but there are a lot of leading practices. I listed 7 earlier that would enable, from our perspective, from our experience, successful innovation. And examples like the platform that I described earlier, RevConnect, that Navigant is working in New York with energy companies and the solution providers. My experience, that can help to spawn innovation and help to facilitate, accelerate flexibility markets. So with that, I would like to stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Are there any questions from the audience? There's ample time. Yes. So I'm supposed to throw this. I don't want to. I'm gonna walk towards you. I don't want to hit you in the face. Just speak into that.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Masier Larrechea. I'm consultant in energy. I worked already with Navigant before, so congratulations for the project in New York. But I have a small question regarding regulation, because now you are talking about the government, you are talking about service providers, you are talking about utilities, and also about customers. But what happens with all the surrounding regarding the regulation? Is the regulator involved on this or not?
In New York?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I should have mentioned that. So I'll say the order, it was I think an executive order, legislation came down from the governor, and I think the governor and the head of the New York PUC, Public Utility Commission, are very close. And so the regulator has been very, very closely involved throughout this process, and the regulator has also spawned new rules that should overcome potential barriers from a cost recovery perspective and those sorts of things to enable the utilities, in the case of New York, energy companies, to pursue this and to sort of not be shy and not be concerned about doing it. So there absolutely has been quite a few changes in terms of the regulatory framework in New York. I would say perhaps one of the more sort of advanced regulatory frameworks with respect to the energy cloud and flexibility markets. They recognized they needed to change, so they did.
Okay, and how do they do it? I mean, did they start first with something small? So let's say kind of pilot projects that they allow this kind of new regulation, or they did it just for the entire market?
That is a very good question.
I'm talking about the process itself.
No. I think I haven't been directly involved in the process. I've watched New York from afar because of what they're doing. But from a sort of redesigning that framework perspective, they did, I think, what any regulator would do, which is to put out a bunch of consultation papers. They had enabling legislation saying, this is the policy that we want, right? No surprise. And they said, how can we achieve that policy? We can make changes here, 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 and here. Let's talk about it. And I know, for instance, that there were some regulatory mechanisms that I thought were a great idea, and that were actually ultimately never implemented because, for whatever reason, it was like a bridge too far. So in a way, it was, I'll say, the normal sort of consultative process, but they had very strong policy objectives, very clear policy objectives to guide them. And they knew that they had to overcome those regulatory barriers.
Thanks.
Okay.
Any other question from the audience? I'll oops, great. We have a bit more time because unfortunately the next speaker will not be able to be present, so we have a bit more time for questions, so don't hesitate. In the meantime, I would have one. Your business is to provide advisory and consulting services to those utilities, so maybe it's a good thing that they don't, like their R&D and their innovation practices are limited. Do you see any drive in the utility business to broaden the scope of like how they're involved in innovation and like breaking the cycle of like old dinosaurs, basically?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So if you go back to when we looked at these 6 utilities, just energy companies, just as an example. I mean, this was sort of I'll say a random grab. So there's random sample here. We knew that these companies were doing some things, but this to me is an example of them recognizing, like, how can we become more innovative, right? What can we do differently going forward? And you see this. I mean, you see this across the globe, and so there are steps being taken. I would say there is value in having someone to work with you and to prod you along, I would say, but certainly there is recognition, and they're each focused on those areas that, from their perspective, those areas are most critical to their success. And that's why you see these differences across 6 very different companies here that we looked at, and you see 6 very different approaches in terms of accelerating and becoming more innovative.
Any other questions? Yes, Remco. Bring that to you.
Thanks, Jerome. Coming back on the regulatory framework, because you have quite some experience in all across the world. At least that's the impression I'm getting. What regulatory system is the best for innovation in your view? It's maybe an easy question, not easy to answer. And the background of the question is that in Europe we often hear, the regulatory system does not allow innovation. It's a hurdle. Is that unique to Europe, or is that something you also hear in the United States or China or Australia?
Okay. So the question was, what regulatory framework, if I'm understanding correctly, what regulatory framework would work best for innovation? Sort of paraphrasing. And I'll be honest with you, I think they're struggling with that everywhere around the world. So we do a lot of work with, I'll pick an example. If you look at, say, UK, in the case of UK, United Kingdom, the DSOs there's a regulatory framework that enables innovation. And we've done a lot of work with innovation there, so they're paid they have a bit of money to innovate. I think that's a great idea. And what we found is they innovate, but they're typically risk averse. And my understanding is that Ofgem, the regulator, is concerned because there haven't been any innovations that have failed. They're all successful because everyone's risk averse, and they'll only pursue the ones that they're confident are going to work. So, but it's a bit of a joke, but it's a recognition that that's what it takes. So the framework in the UK, I think, is a good example that looks at encouraging innovation in terms of the network, grid modernization, those sorts of things. The framework that I talked about in terms of New York, there was very clear recognition, and there's funding for I think they call it, I forget the exact name, but it's sort of like the funding for I'll say the what do they call it? DPS, distributed power services or something, that they will pay the utilities to develop that platform. Sort of like they would develop, say, a CRM or a CIS. They say, we recognize you need this, you can get funding for that. So I don't think there's any single answer, but I do believe that from a regulatory framework perspective, there has to be some willingness for energy companies to take risks, and also perhaps to fail and not to disallow those investments. I think the biggest thing that I hear is, I'm going to make an investment, we're going to make an investment, and it's going to be disallowed. Who would want to do that, right? If that's the nature of business, is to make money on your asset base. So there's a little bit of give and take that I think has to happen, and I don't know that there's any sort of single model that's best, but I do think it's important that the regulator recognize this need for innovation, and I would say to cut the energy company a little bit of slack, if you will, from a framework perspective. But it's a huge challenge, and I think the regulators and the energy companies, in a way, are in this together, and they should both sort of recognize, look each other in the eye, and have that sort of have that conversation.
Any other question from the audience? Otherwise, I would have a last one. We talked a lot about the regulators. We didn't really talk about network operators or system operators, depending on the region of the world you're in. In your project in New York, so there was a lot of talk between the regulator and the utilities, and this will basically to set a framework for innovation. What was the role, whether it was a positive one or like a break to innovation, of the network operators in that case?
For the network operators?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah.
So they were very clear from the outset. It was very clear that they had an important role in this process, which I think we'd all agree they would in any market. So it was very clear that they had an important role. My understanding from a regulatory framework perspective, there were specific kind of asks of them, right? This is a sort of new framework. This is what we're looking for from you with, I don't want to be too specific, it's maybe it wasn't too specific, but certainly some kind of funding model in terms of funding model and objectives to try to make that happen. So there was a recognition of their role, and there was sort of recognition within that regulatory framework of the new role, or the enhanced role, let's say, change mandate, if you will, of the energy companies in that to make that happen. And again, that doesn't happen overnight, and there needs to be a lot of discussion. But in a way, you would have the policy align with the regulatory and align with the objectives for the energy companies. Those things, hey, they have to be aligned, or I think you're going to have a challenge and you're going to have a conflict.
Well, thank you very much, Todd. I think we'll leave it at that for the moment. Before we, thank you very much. Before we go to our next speaker, as I told you, the speaker that was scheduled just after Todd will not be able to join us today. So before we go to our next speaker, and because we try to stick to the timing that was on the program, we'll have a short 5-minute break. So it can be good time for you to grab a coffee or something, and we'll meet in about 5 minutes here. In the meantime, we're happy to continue the discussion if you have specific questions with regard to the organization of this day. But we'll be off for 5 minutes, and we'll meet there at 10 past 10. So good morning again. We're gonna restart. So I suggest you take your seats, put your headsets on, and we're gonna restart in a few seconds. So as a second presentation for this morning, we'll have Remco Franken from Priogen. So Remco is the head of business development and analysis at Priogen. And so we're gonna go from the consulting world to the real kind of world of trading and optimization and aggregation, etc. I give you the floor, Remco, and good luck for the presentation. We'll have again a few minutes towards the end for longer questions. Just take this.
Well, good morning to all of you. We start a few minutes earlier. I think in German they call it the Pausenclown, yeah? Meaning you have to talk a few more minutes than you had planned. I will use those few more minutes to give a little bit more larger introduction about the company, because I guess most of you have not heard the presentation. I have not heard about the company yet. How do we go to the next one? This one, yeah. So a few words about Priogen. We are what we call a so-called risk taker. We are something like 50 people. And we, on a typical day, are 1,000 megawatts long or short on the German power market. And in addition, 500 on the Dutch market or the French market. We are a speculative trading company. How are we doing that? We are having lots of weather models. The weather models predict what will be the outcome of the German EPEX for tomorrow. If, for example, our models predict the outcome should be 60, the market is trading at 65, we simply go short and hope that our models are right so we can buy it back at 60. That's 85% of our business. The rest of our business is the hedging for wind and solar. What do I mean by that? We buy, for example, all the output of a wind park for a fixed price for the coming 3 years. Meaning we take the forecasting risk, the shaping risk, all those kind of risks. It goes hassle-free to our company. And why do I give you those two examples? Again, it's to show you we are really a risk taker and not just a service provider or anything like that. What's the topic of today? The topic of today is subsidy-free renewables. And I'm not telling you any secret, we are heading to a subsidy-free renewable world. And what does that mean? That will have quite an impact. If you looked in the past, a typical renewable was costing something like 80 to 100 euros per megawatt hour. And payback time, typical something like 8 to 10 years. From that 80 euro, ballpark half of it was what you call the commodity value, the real power value. My example, it's the 40 euro. That means there was also a need for support of another 40 euro. Maybe a little bit less. In some countries you had things like guarantees of origin. The Netherlands are famous for that. Italy, you see that. So all in all, from the 80 euro, half of it was energy value, the rest was subsidy, or what you call green image value, in the sense of guarantees of origin. And that's what you see on the graph. Where are we heading to? We're heading to subsidy-free. And for example, in the Netherlands, at the moment, we are building 400 megawatt of wind at sea every 6 months without subsidy. Just to give you a picture of how fast this is going. Yeah? What's the income currently needed for those wind at sea? Call it a 60 euro. Yeah? prices have gone down for wind and solar, meaning where we needed 80 euro in the past, we only need 60 euros at the moment. The guarantee of origin value is increasing. In the Netherlands it's currently trading at 8 euros already, but you see in all kind of other countries it's increasing. Why is it increasing? Because many utilities and many industries want to show they contribute to the energy transition. And how do you prove you contribute to the energy transition? By having guarantees of origin. So this is a very clear trend that value is going up. And where it was neglectable in the past, it becomes relevant in the future. That's also what you see in the graph. You have the commodity value, which is nearly covering all the cost. The rest is what you call the guarantee of origin value. You also see the circle is smaller because we need 60 euro now, where we needed 80 euros in the past. I hope clear for everyone so far. If there's any question, feel free to raise your hands, and Jerome will then be so kind to throw you the microphone. What does it mean for hedging? Because investment in a wind park is an expensive investment. You talk about, call it €1 million per megawatt. In the past, it was very easy. Once you got a subsidy grant from the government, or the entity responsible for it, you basically had de-risked your business case, at least from a financial perspective. You of course still had to build the stuff, but you didn't care about the market value. With all respect of the direct for marketing hobby in Germany, that is not really a risk when you're making the business case. It's more the icing on the cake. 95% was basically hedged by the support grant. And then you basically had a little bit left of market risk, what you would call the direct for marketing risk in Germany or the Netherlands. You also have some shaping risks. It's a few percent of your business case. And as long as you don't do anything stupid, you always make that. That's the past. Easy. Also the banks loved it. Imagine going to a bank with a subsidy grant by the German state or the French state or the Dutch state with AAA. The banks love that. In the future, it will be different. There will not be this paper from the government anymore stating, hey, we AAA rated government give a subsidy guarantee for the coming 10 years. No, at investment decision, you have a full exposure to your commodity. And if you go to the bank and you want to get the money, the bank wants to be sure you can pay back that money. And the bank will immediately realize, wow, what if commodity prices go down and I don't get my loan back? So the banks will ask for a guarantee that you indeed get the commodity income you've projected. Because that is 88%, call it 90% of the value. So at investment decision, you're basically stuck with the problem that you are exposed to commodity, the power prices. Your project probably will be online 2 years from now. So your commodity exposure is for a year, the current year plus 2, till the current year plus 12. Well, if you look at the Apex website, you will see there are some quotes for the next year, also for 2020, 21, 22. We're looking for a quote for 25, that's difficult. And even if you find the quote, being able to trade it, that's even more difficult. Meaning that it's not easy to hedge that commodity exposure. There's an additional component there, because I'm talking about the baseload risk, which is the reference contract. However, your wind park or your solar park are not producing baseload. They are producing random variations. So you have to convert those random variations into this nice baseload. And that's a risk as well, because if you basically look at what's going to happen if all the wind blows at the same time, you get zero prices. So you know, when your wind park produces the most, there's a high chance the price will be the lowest on the spot market. That's what you call the shaping risk. What does it cost to convert renewable output to the reference value? So I'm splitting basically the hedging problem in two parts. One is the shaping risk to get from a non-standard product, being wind and solar output, to a standard product, being baseload. And the second one, the baseload, which is a standard product. And that's the way to basically look at this from a hedging perspective. Then, of course, what you still have is the forecasting risk, but that's minor compared to the first two risks. Everyone still with me? So how are we going to do this in the future? If you're a developer, the lower the risk, the lower your financing cost. And you're talking about subsidy-free wind parks, solar parks, lots of competition. You need low financing cost, otherwise your park will not be competitive. In the past, you had this 10-year subsidy grant. If you want to basically keep the same business model, you now need to get a 10-year commodity contract from a AAA rated counterpart. That will be difficult to find. Maybe AA will do it as well. So you basically have a problem. Your old business model does not work anymore, and your new business model you have to develop. And there might be players who are willing to sell you for 10-year or buy 10-year fixed price power, but do they have the credit to basically back up this 10-year contract? And maybe you think they have the credit, but more importantly, does the bank think that counterpart is credible? Then one good news for the developer, the guarantees of origin are increasing in value. Because there's quite this energy transition, everyone wants to contribute, that really helps. And why does industry want to contribute? If they contribute to the energy transition, they, for example, get a higher rating in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. If you have a higher rating in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, your company can lend money for less interest. So that's the driver for many industries to basically contribute to this energy transition by buying the guarantees of origin. Now from the buyer perspective, imagine you are your own company and you want to buy this risk. There's quite some shaping risk. How much does it cost to convert renewable output into baseload? And if you've done that part, how will the Cal plus 10 develop? We're talking about 2080. And to give you a number, the last 2 months, the German baseload for next year changed €5 in value. That's the most liquid product for next year, €5. Imagine what's the risk on an illiquid product 10 years out, over a 10-year horizon. I mean, €5 would not start covering it. You're talking probably about a €20. So it's a high risk. So what do we see in the market? What are we going to see? We're going to see a hedging mismatch. First, about the guarantees of origin. That's not where the problem is, because the seller wants to sell it long term. If you're a wind park developer, a solar park developer, you are love to sell your guarantees of origin for the coming 10 years. And the good news is the buyer typically also wants to get it for a longer term. If you look at recent PPAs, corporate PPAs, they typically are for 8, 10 or 12 years. Why? Because if you are an industrial, you don't want every year to have complex tender processes. You basically want to buy the power and be sure you do something for the environment for the coming 10 years. And maybe do another leg a year later, but you are willing to do a 10-year commitment. Also, because the outright exposure is not that long. Whether you buy for €5 10 years out, you won't go bust on that. The value of guarantees of origin might go to 1, they might go to 8, but it's a manageable risk for many industries and many utilities. So very clearly, the tenor of guarantees of origin is not a problem. That can be done long term. The price, both parties want a fixed price. The developer wants a fixed price because that assures him the income, but also the industry wants a fixed price because he will know what does it cost me to contribute to the energy transition. So no issue there. The issue is in the commodity exposure. Because the seller wants to sell this long term, 10 years, and the buyer at most wants to go to, wants sometimes to go longer term as well, but not for a fixed price. He wants to buy it indexed. Why? What's the nightmare of a purchase manager of a chemical industry? That he's in the press because he did a 10-year contract for €70 and the market is currently trading at 40. That's not a good thing. So what you always see in industry is that they always want to have a price index. They're willing to take 1 year fixed price risk, but not 5 or 10 years. So there's a very clear mismatch, especially on the price. Because the seller wants to get a fixed price for all his output. The dream for a seller is every megawatt hour gets 50 or 60 euros, irrespective of the time of use. The buyer basically first wants to have this index, and second, he wants to have it according to his shape. So you basically see shape from windmill to baseload,
and then from baseload it has to be shaped to the industry part again. So you see a very large mismatch there. One guy wanting to sell fixed price, the other person wanting to buy floating. And then one guy wanting to sell an illiquid product, being the output of wind and solar, the buyer wanting to buy a liquid product, being the baseload. So this will be a big thing in the future. That also means, that's the good news for all of you who are looking for a new job, there will be room for new companies, for risk takers. And I've identified two. One will be what you call the shaping service. Which company is willing to convert renewable output to baseload for the coming 10 years, starting 2 years from now? You need pretty advanced models there, but also, if I would take that risk, I would want to have some flexibility long as well. Just sitting it out naked, that sounds pretty scary for me as a trader. So if you are going into this business, you also want to have long flexibility, for example, batteries or other flexibility sources. You want to build a portfolio to basically take these risks. So once you're in the shaping service business, you need the good models, but also you need to offset your short flexibility with long flexibility. And your typical one to do that also is the 5 to 10 year horizon, which is good because a battery supplier also needs a 10-year contract. So at least there we have a match. The other thing you're seeing, you need a reasonable credit standing. Doesn't have to be AAA, because we only talk about shaping risk. And on shaping risk, you can lose a few euro per megawatt hour, meaning it's a manageable risk. Imagine you are the seller, the wind park owner, you've sold the shaping risk to a company, the company goes bust. The risk is typical digestible because it's only a few euro for the outstanding years. That's different for the baseload. For baseload, the risk could be 20 or 30 euros per megawatt hour for the coming years. So especially for the baseload buying, you need an extremely good credit. I would say A-rated or better. There are only very few companies who have that. That also means this will be a high risk business, I already explained the 20 euro, but also high margin, because very little competition. And there is basically a seller who needs to sell, otherwise he doesn't get his financing. So if you have the capital, this baseload buying can be very interesting. But you need to have good nerves. Think about the 5 euro the German baseload changed for next year in the last 2 months. So baseload buying will be a new hole in the market. Could be something for the utilities, could be something for the banks that they come back. Could be something for new companies. You can think about stock-listed vehicles, where basically everyone can subscribe, and it's basically just having that risk. The shaping service, there I would see a little bit more competition, because everyone who is having some long flexibility can at least provide some of those shaping services. That's a way of monetizing your long flexibility. Now about the volume. If you're serious about subsidy-free renewables, in Europe we consume something like 3,000 terawatt hours. Apparently it's called 3 pentawatt hour. I didn't know that. If you presume 25% is generated by renewables, and I know the targets are higher, but let's just take the conservative approach, that already means 750 terawatt hours of shaping and hedging needs. If you calculate that back to base load, you talk about 85,000 megawatts. So this will be a real big market. And again, you're talking about euros margin for the shaping service and risk, and many euros margin for the base load and the risk. So if you just take the 10 euro margin times the 750 terawatt hour, you get an impressive amount of margin with a high risk. That's what I wanted to share with you. Any questions?
Yeah, we'll send the little box to Algo call, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Remco. You can hear me?
No, it's pretty poor.
Can you hear me? Is it switched on? No? Yeah? Ah, I have to stand close to you.
You can also speak here, yeah.
It's working, but now
it's working. Okay.
Thank you very much, Remco. Very interesting, very relevant. One thing I think we also need is a liquid forward market to manage this base load risk, or how did you call it? how important is that? For example, if you compare Germany, the bid-ask spread for a year-ahead project is only 0.1 euro. In the Dutch market, it's higher. Some markets, it's 1 euro. Could you say something or quantify what an illiquid market would mean for the cost of renewable integration?
Okay, thank you. So question is, what does the liquidity or the lack of liquidity mean for the integration of renewables? And if you look a little bit at the bid-ask spread on, I would call it a CAL 23 deal in the Netherlands, I'm pretty sure it will be a 3 euro bid-ask spread. In Germany, probably it would be something like 1 euro, 1 euro 50, if you take your time and don't want too big of a volume. And in essence, that bid-ask spread is going to the traders, meaning it's not going to the renewables. That means that this basically means that the renewables need more money. So the short answer would be, the higher the bid-ask spread, the less fast the energy transition will go, because the cost will become higher. Someone is taking this risk of the bid-ask spread. Imagine you have to sit on it for a few days or weeks. You have to buy quite some volume. And again, people will only take that risk if they get paid for that. So if you take the 1 or 2 euro on the, call it 60 euro commodity, you're talking about a few percent, which basically will go to those guys providing the hedging services. And then to come back to Paul's question, the more liquid the forward market, the lesser that hedging premium will be. So a liquid forward market will help the energy transition. However, how we get that, I'm not too optimistic, because you also need to have this very good credit standing, and you need to have many players being active. And that's the challenge. Paul, did it answer your question? Thank you, Paul.
Great. And we'll have a question from Jan.
Yeah. You are talking about guarantee of origin. This idea was invented many years ago when the electricity was dirty in the grid. If you go 5 years, because I think it's quite a high risk, the guarantee of origin. If you go forward, you will see that it's cleaning up. Very soon we pass 50% clean energy in the network. In some regions, it's probably 100% clean. You still think it's fair to buy a guarantee of origin?
Question.
So it's a very good question, Jan. Is it fair to buy a guarantee of origin? And am I free to say you are Norwegian, Jan? Yeah. Because that basically will give me the example. Because what's happened in the past is that the Norwegians claimed in Norway they were 100% green. And the Dutch in the Netherlands claimed we were 100% green as well, because we bought all the guarantee of origins from Norway. And that, of course, is what you call the greenwashing. And there's now a very clear trend. Greenwashing is out of fashion. That's why the industry wants to have a line of sight linked to the source of the energy. They don't have a problem buying it from Norway, but they want to know it comes from Norway, from that area. So the one trend you are seeing is that industry, again, to prove to Dow Jones Sustainability Index that you are really renewable, you need to do these guarantees of origin. In Europe, we are not at the 25% renewables yet. I mean, you Norwegians are, but I think you're the only country together with Iceland. Meaning that, in my view, this will take another 25 years. Then the second thing you're seeing there is the full disclosure, which is going to happen. What does full disclosure mean? At the moment, if you don't have a guarantee of origin, you just say, oh, my power, that's the country mix. So imagine, let's take Belgium. If you don't put a guarantee of origin to your Belgium end user, you will have to tell him, this is the average country mix of Belgium. The 60% nuclear, 20% wind, whatever it is. That's easy, because everyone gets the average. In a few years, there will be full disclosure, meaning that you have to buy a certificate, which can even have a negative price, if it's, for example, a lignite plant, because the power has to come from somewhere. So every megawatt hour will have a guarantee of origin associated with it. That could be a green one, but if it's not a green one, it's not nothing. No, then it has to be a lignite one. You have to get a certificate for that. That's the trend I'm seeing, the full disclosure trend. That's to answer your question. I'm not so worried. If I would tomorrow join the industry, I would go long the guarantee of origin for the industry, because it's a good business case anyway, and I see very little downside. Did that answer your question, Jan?
We would have time for one last question from the audience. Then I'll ask the last question.
Okay.
It's actually like building up on Jan's question. If you start having those guarantees of origin, like very local for, I don't know, solar power from this specific region in the Netherlands, in your case, how do you manage that there's sufficient liquidity and then the value of those guarantees of origin comes out? So like, how do you manage that flexibility, that liquidity on the guarantees of origin market so that it sustains the investment decisions by a renewables developer?
So the question, if you basically want to stimulate local renewable generation, how do you stimulate that with the guarantee of origin? Is that a correct summary of the question? And I basically can give you from my experience. I was a consultant before I joined PowerGen, and I was also advising many industry about their green purchasing strategy and about the guarantees of origin. What you clearly see there, if there's a local park close to the industry, that local park will get a premium from the industry. In other words, when a solar guarantee of origin normally has a value of, call it €6, and the solar park is close to the industry who wants to buy it, typical the construction will be that the local industry gives an additional premium for the fact it's close by. And in that way it becomes very illiquid because it's a tailor-made contract, but it of course has a very strong regional off-spin if you basically can show, wow, it's really close together. So that's basically the way I've seen it working. The other thing you're seeing in guarantee of origin, it's not a commodity market because there are so many quality aspects of a guarantee of origin that I'm much more a believer in this line of sight thinking, that you basically link the guarantee of origin to the source, and that basically together determines the value. And then you have still the guarantees of origin because there need to be some reference, but that's, especially for the bigger players, they will afford to have this line of sight themselves. Did I give you a fair answer?
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Remco.
It's a pleasure.
As a next speaker, we will have Volker Dragon from Siemens. Volker is the Senior Manager for Industry Affairs at Siemens. And I understand you will talk to us about flexibility and data and all this. I'll put up the presentation and here you go. The floor is yours.
And take the hand microphone. Do you hear me? Okay, great. So, who of you are wine lovers? Hands up. Wine lovers? Not that many? Ah, yeah, this is a nice picture. So, for all of you, I have good news. The northern wine growing border. It was here in this, close to the 15th degree in the mid-90s. This is the area where I originally come from. And now it moved up roughly 1,000 kilometers north. You can judge, is this a good idea or a good news or not so good? It has maybe something to do with climate change. And climate change has also a little bit to do with buildings. Buildings use 40% of all energy. We all know this. Meanwhile, it's a common sense, it's a fact, but we don't care that much anymore. 25% of all water, 33% of all greenhouse gases. The total life cycle costs for a building occur during their operation phase. It's not the building. You always talk about building. It's so expensive. Building for 20, 30 million. No. The costs occur during the next 30 or 40 years where the building is really running. And we have a lot more of young people. Young people change dramatically the way we use energy. They use a lot of electrical energy with all these nice devices we have. All these smartphones, all these things we have on our ears today, everything needs a lot of energy. And this leads to a dramatic change in energy consumption. It goes down from fossil fuels up to the use of electrical energy. 70% down on one hand side and 150% up on the other hand side. And for that, this has enormous impact. Buildings have enormous impact on business as a contributor. And this is where we make the hook. It's not so much the energy price where we talk about, it's talk about the contribution of energy towards a business. And what changed in buildings? Buildings start talking. Sounds a little bit strange, but really at the time being, we have a lot of sensors in buildings. They give us millions and millions of data. And for the time being, we don't make that much use out of these data we have from buildings. But today's technology, and everybody talks about digitalization, and digitalization helps us to understand the message of a building. And if you invest more and more in this kind of technology, it helps your business to flourish. What are the drivers? What are the main drivers? Yes, of course, political decisions for energy transition. We know all the new EPPD coming out last winter, the so-called winter package, maybe you know it, the deactivation of conventional power plants, more focus on renewable energies, all these kind of things. Modified consumption patterns, I addressed it already. People use more electrical energy instead of fossil energy. Compliance with legal and regulatory provisions, different production processes, and energy efficiency programs to a certain extent. E-mobility will need a lot of energy, and I'm not so convinced for the time being that we can provide all this electrical energy if we have, for example, in Germany moving 1 million electric vehicles around. I'm not sure that we can have enough electrical energy to fuel all these e-cars for the time being. And from the industry side, we bring more and more the production closer to the people. It's not a kind of a mass production, and then we look what the market for that is. We tailor production to the needs of the people. And these drivers and consumption decreases and the increase of electrification, this needs more and more kind of flexibility. This is the way we face from the building technology side. We have a change from the hardware to the power of software. We have a change from the supplier and main contractor, general contractor. He has the building and the building process in the hand to the power of the tenant. The tenant today says what he really wants. And we need a lot of kind of flexibility, not electrical flexibility, but flexibility inside the building. Today, a building can build for different purposes, maybe for an office building. Tomorrow in this office building will be built in a fitness center, for example. Completely different installations, and we need some flexibility there. Therefore, the tenant defines what the building should be for. And the fixed installations, we move everything what we have fixed as a computer service inside the building to cloud applications. And cloud applications need, again, a lot of energy power. For example, one SMS, if you send one SMS, this needs as much energy as we need to run a refrigerator 1 year. It's true, because there are a lot of servers, they be addressed again and again, and it's running around the world. And this needs huge power. we don't imagine that. Just one SMS, you can run your fridge 1 year. What do we do with all this data? We have to analyze it, of course. And we have to create insights, actionable insights. Because analyzing is one thing, you know what to do, but the next thing is what do we do with what we know. This needs actions. Improve your cost structure, create additional revenues, all these kind of things. And in this new flexibility market, there come new players. Owners of a building are a new player in the flexibility market. Aggregators are new players in the flexibility market. The traditional energy suppliers are players and will be, from their business point of view and from the business model, new players in the electricity market. Everything is in a flow. And nobody knows exactly for the time being where it comes out, because everybody in this game wants to make some money. And this is the great question: who really makes the money? From a technical point of view, it's not really rocket science. It's feasible, it's makeable. But to generate enough money, enough currency in this game for everybody who will be and has to be involved, this is the big question we all face. Therefore, coming back to buildings, if buildings perform the way it should, your funds can be allocated to your core business. And funds allocated to the core business says a company like BMW is not an electricity company or energy company. They build cars. They want to have their money for the investment in car production or research and development in this respect. You have an aging infrastructure which cause a lot of concerns to you, and sustainability objectives you have to meet more and more and more. Just a quick example: manufacturer of sports goods called Puma in Herzogenaurach. They built a very new headquarters with all energy efficiency measures. And we said, okay, costs you a lot of money, and you have so roughly 25 years for amortization. And said, okay, yeah, it's true. But the real reason why we did that is because the people, they buy our stuff are between 15 and 25 years old. And we want to show them that we care for their future. And we move in with our stores in buildings which have a kind of a certificate. LEED, BREEAM, DG and BAE, you name it, you have it. To see we span this chain along this line. And therefore we expect that they more buy our sports goods, our stuff, our shoes, our t-shirts, our trousers, instead of the one from Nike or Adidas. And this is a major trigger from the building side and from the customer side to step in this kind of electricity market. It's not the cost for energy itself. This we had to learn. It was not that easy, but we had learned, and to change our arguments. Because a smart building or energy efficiency building has the effect of a direct competitive advantage. In the example I gave to you, or even in a small scale, if you decrease your cost a little bit, and if you have kind of a mass product, you, for example, produce some kind of these glasses, and you sell it to the market for 25 cents, and your competitor can produce the same glass for 23, then you have a real cost advantage. And this can come out of energy efficiency. What do you need? Of course, yeah, people. People are the main thing. It's not only technology, because the expertise is in the head of people. You can do a lot of analysis via your algorithms and your machines. But at the end of the day, the know-how and the expertise is in the brain of people and of energy experts. Technology for sure, and services because it's an ongoing business. This is the way of technology we provide for building owners and building users. And here I have brought an example where it really worked, in the past. You can see the screen. I'm in front of you. Oh, I'm so sorry. So, Zello is a company. It runs a shopping center in Finland, the second largest of that, 100 square meters, 23 million visitors per year. And with them, we tried for not really the first time, but it was a really good showcase how we can install flexibility, energy flexibility between the grid and a building. And we need a lot of time to find out where are really the benefits is. And for sure, they save 100 kilo euro per year from energy and maintenance, and from the energy market revenues, they get a kickback from them. But the main thing I want focus you on is what you have to need, what you have to provide in advance, because it's quite this understanding of these new earning models. I mentioned it before. It's not that easy as it looked like on a PowerPoint slide. It's really not that easy. The solutions to benefit from these compensation markets, how should this really work? The solutions for automatic purchase, selling of electricity, and the controlling of this consumption. We need a lot of technology and a lot of know-how in the back. And to know building automation, microkits, all this connectivity, the platforms, the digital solutions. These huge spaces you have to bring together. And you can buy this from different sources, different companies. Then you have to bring all these different ideas from these companies on one platform, on one table. You can do it with a company, a big one in this case, which has all this expertise in-house and can bring this together. Maybe Siemens is a source of that. But this needs time, this needs a lot of effort, this needs a high frustrating tolerance for all partners inside, but it can work, it can really work. And this is one of our best examples. We have some other for sure. It's one of our best examples where it really worked and where we satisfied our main customer, the customer of our customers, the utility, and all the parties in between. So, coming to an end. Driver for transformation, yes, the sensor technology and software analytics, we all know that. The combination of IT and domain know-how, this is the crucial part. If guys from IBM Watson come and say, okay, we can do this easily, we are IT guys, yes, they can do the IT part, but all this other expertise, they have a lack of it. Digitalization, yes, is a new source of a new business. We at the very beginning of that to find out where is really the meat at the bone. And technology is not everything. We need a lot of regulation on one hand side, and we need a lot of consensus in our society to follow this path in the future. And maybe we will have some more good wine in the future also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Volker. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Are there any questions? Then I'll have one. We were talking a lot about, and here on social consensus is again like something that comes up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion generally in the media and in the public sphere around data privacy, who owns the data, etc. So I hear you talk a lot about the data here, that you can use. I hear a lot of TSOs talking about the data that they can use. Like it seems that everybody wants to use that, but who owns it? How is it kept safe?
This is one of the biggest obstacles we all face, because rules and regulation and data security, it's not the easiest part in that. We can do it in some research solutions where all the people involved give their allowance to use their data and to use it for different purposes. But in so-called real life, it's much more difficult, and it's difficult from country to country. What you can do in Italy, it's different from what you can do in Germany, and here in Austria, it's completely different what you can do in Russia, for example. So you have to figure out step by step every case in every country, what is possible, what is feasible, which kind of data can we use, which kind of data can you as a private person are allowed to give to a utility. You have to separate, for example, also the data of usage and the data of direct currency that comes in. So you need two. It's not only a smart meter. So it sounds always cool. A smart meter. We have a smart meter. This rules everything. It rules, yeah, how many energy I purchase. That's all. How I use it. It's not allowed to give this information, or you have to fragment it, that you cannot really go back to a single user. And this makes also this kind of future flexibility much more complicated than we, from the technology point of view, think about it.
Thank you very much.
Some more questions? Yes.
It's like more about applying the technology in shopping malls and hospitals, and like what about if we are considering the users themselves? How can we motivate the people or make it more attractive for them to?
First of all, it's a kind of awareness and education. What it's a kind of awareness and education. What really do I do with energy? How do I guzzle energy for nothing? So the example I gave to you with this SMS, nobody cares about that. So to learn what is the value, the real value of energy. Energy it's there. We switch on the light, we switch on our appliances, whatever. But we should maybe think, what is if this is not available? What happens with us, with our society, if energy, electric energy, is by sudden not available? And we have war in 1 week's time. If we shut down, for example, if we would shut down the energy supply for Austria, in 1 week's time we are in a war. Definitely, because nothing works. You cannot buy some gasoline for your car. People say, okay, then I sit in my car and drive away. No, you have no chance, because all the pumps work with electrical energy. You get no gasoline. You have no heating. You have no cooling. You have no data center. You have no internet. You have no nothing. And to really judge and value what energy and what electrical energy means for us and for our day-to-day life, we have to focus much more on that.
So maybe a good blackout will do us good. Thank you very much.
Good wine and no blackout.
Thank you very much, Volker. We're gonna move to the second part of our morning hub session. Today we're gonna have, so after the presentation, we're gonna have a panel discussion. Wait, oops. I'm gonna try to, yes, get out of this, right. So we're going to have a panel discussion, and I'm going to invite, so on our theme of monetizing flexibility again, I'm going to invite Jen Petersen from Agder Energy, Jens Buchner from eBridge, Pietro Rabassi from Nord Pool Spots, Rune Hogga from Nodes, and Christophe Lamoureux from NG to come to the stage. Please grab a seat. I'll try to take the one in the corner, if you don't mind. Yeah. So welcome, warm welcome to the 5 of you. We're going to have a panel discussion for the next 45 minutes. I think there must be a microphone standing somewhere around. Yes, that we'll put here. And here we go. So today we'll continue the discussion that we started through the presentations. And we propose to focus this discussion today on, like, first setting the stage. What are we really talking about when we're talking about monetizing flexibility? And then we'll look a little bit into what kind of evolution we need from the current market design sector setting to allow flexible capacities, flexible technologies to bring value to the sector. But first, I propose that we do a round of introduction. So we're going to start with Rune. And so tell us a little bit about you, maybe your company, and what you'd like to talk about to us today in terms of monetizing flexibility.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Rune Hogga, so I'm the CEO of Nodes. Nodes is our startup company owned by Nord Pool and Agder Energy. So Nodes is establishing independent, open and integrated marketplace for decentralized flexibility. So by independent meaning, it has to be a neutral market operator. By open, we mean having open APIs, so it's open for different kind of technology, both on the flexible side and the DSO side. And by integrated, we mean that the flexibility from the distribution level can be made available to all levels of the grid. So when it comes to monetizing, we see that this marketplace will give value to the grid companies, having a tool to avoid congestions in the grid, and also to use flexibility, local flexibility, to avoid investments in the grid. And on the flexible side, we see also that the asset owners of the flexible assets also have a marketplace to put the flexibility and to get a good price of the available flexibility. So that's kind of the core concept of the Nodes platform, being an independent, open and integrated marketplace for decentralized flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christophe?
Yes, hello. So I'm today a senior expert in optimization, portfolio optimization and regulation for NG. So why is this flexibility question important for NG? So we, as you probably know, we are engaged in an energy transition today through the transformation of our activities. We are well placed in all over Europe, where we act as a producer of energy, owning different technologies, pump storages, thermal assets, batteries, but also as energy supplier. We are today the world leader in energy efficiency solution. So we have a good knowledge and a large portfolio of consumer and prosumer. So if you put that together, we have a lot of means from different technology to offer flexibility. How we want to monetize it? Through the existing energy market today. But there is certain gap to be filled in. As you say, congestion. Today, they are filtering, the bid are filtered for congestion. We want that to be removed. Secondly, we want the system operator to be more transparent about the flexibility needs that they have. And there, we think that there is a shift of paradigm between the investment base that they do today toward a service based, so that the flexibility needs are expressed to the market participant, and that the market participant can come with an effective and cost-efficient solution for the consumer.
Thank you, Christophe. Pietro?
Yeah, merci, Jérôme. So my name is Pietro Rabassi. I'm the director for the Central European markets in Nord Pool. And to your question, why am I sitting here? I'd like to answer with 3 points. First of all, as Nord Pool, we are a power exchange, or a NEMO, as the new terminology says, for spot power markets across Europe. So those are the traditional markets, so to say. And then Rune also mentioned that we have a 50% ownership in nodes. But I'll let the nodes people talk about themselves. What the other point I wanted to say, I mean, it's something that we're very proud of, to be part of nodes. And I think it's a challenge for the future, and it's got some bright prospect. Then the other point is, why is Nord Pool also important for flexibility, accommodating for flexibility? What do we do? I mean, here I would like to mention 3 examples of things that we do. First of all, flexibility means any type of players in the market, so both small and large. And at Nord Pool, we really want to lower barriers to trade in the traditional markets. So we accommodate for customers of any sort, and that's our goal. And how do we do it? Basically, we offer a very easy and simple access to the market, and with a cost-competitive offering. So that is the first point. Second point, flexibility means also being able to trade also closer to delivery. At Nord Pool, we are always striving to accommodate for that. For instance, in Estonia and Finland, we have a pilot that allows for trading until 30 minutes to delivery, whereas in the rest of the Nordics it's 60 minutes. In Germany you can trade until 20 minutes before delivery, and until delivery within 1 TSO area. And then the other, Rune mentioned also the APIs. That is for the decentralized markets, but also for the traditional markets. We want to facilitate the use of APIs, because that's the new window for the future. And we basically have APIs for all the systems that are free of access, and the information can be easily found in a developers hub at Nord Pool. And also we have a close relationship with the tech people that implement the APIs at our customers and our internal tech people. And the third point I wanted to say is that flexibility means also any granularity, and specifically the smallest one. So currently we accommodate for all granularities in the intraday markets, specifically 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, more complicated, complex products such as blocks. And we have to see how things will develop in the future. And the last point I want to mention, that was my third point, is what is also going to be the relationship within traditional markets and decentralized markets. That is also a key point that we have to answer and tackle in the upcoming weeks and months. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jens?
All right. My name is Jens Büchner from eBridge. eBridge is a consulting firm on market design and system operations. So we usually as a middleman between the different market parties in the market. Why we are here today? Because we are involved in different areas and aspects of local markets. And I was asked to give a few statements as an introductory note. First statement is, why do we consider at all or discuss at all market design for local flexibility? If we look at our wholesale markets in Europe, usually they deal with flexibility pretty well. In Germany, we deal until very close to real-time flexibility. The issue here, the crucial thing, is local flexibility. So the geographical area, I think, is the new aspect and we are looking for. And why? If you look to Germany again, last year we needed more than 1 billion euros per year just to relieve congestions in the grid. This is a probably increasing number in the future. We also think about new storage capabilities when we get probably load-driven congestions. Currently, we only have generation-driven congestions. So a large volume, and we do not believe that networks will be completely built to have no congestions. So we need a smart, intelligent way to manage congestions, and flexibility markets provide that. That's number one. Number two is, do these markets work in reality? And we are very happy that we are involved in one of the pilot projects where we used nodes as a market platform, plus aggregators, plus large large DSOs in Germany who used it. And the outcome was, yes, this flexibility market can be used for efficient congestion management for a DSO. It reduces costs. It creates significant incentives for the providers to provide additional flexibility into the market. And the last thing is, it even saved CO2 emissions. So it is helpful. And number three is everything solved then? do we have already the solution? And I think it's what you said, yeah, there are some issues we need to deal. But we have a flexibility market which is a part in the total market. We have intraday markets, we have balancing markets, we have day-ahead markets which do exist, and we need to look carefully at the interactions. And we see that the flexibility markets move closer to real time, so they become very crucial if they go for network operators for physical delivery. So the third one is, the third issue, the third statement that I would like to give, we need to make sure that the product we sell in that market is at the end of the day really physically delivered, because only that helps the network operators.
Thank you. Jan?
Thank you. I'm Jan Pedersen. I'm heading the Agder Energy office in Brussels. But my main task is to identify business opportunities for the utility. And of course, one of those are nodes, but we have several others. So when we look for business opportunities, especially in connection with the future flexibility market, we look at the market and regulatory drivers for change. And if you start and looking at the push for renewables, has created the smart grid, which created the convergence of IT and OT, which created the need for availability of real-time data, which is digitalization. And digitalization is a new technology, which of course require a new market design and also new market tools. And all this, I mean, if you look at it, it's innovation from A to B to C to D to F. And what is really strange is if you look at the situation today about market, policymakers, I would say incentives, have failed really to optimize the deployment of flexibility. So what's the reason for that? Probably it's too little innovation. Somebody has already pointed that out. And I think that if you look where you should put your innovation in the future, you have to go back to the centralized grid where we are retiring or phasing out the dependence on fossil fuels, which means that we have to provide new storage sources. That's one thing. But the next thing is also that we have to have a much more flexible consumption in the power system in the future. And I think both will open for a lot of innovations and new players. And the role of the utility or the DSO, whatever you call him, must be to enable commercial players to come into the distributed ecosystem and to help the system operators in the future with market-based solutions. So I think that's where also we as a utility probably will try to find a new position.
Thank you very much. So to start with, in your different statements, I heard things around flexible consumption, shorter-term trading on existing intraday markets, for instance, on the one side, but also congestion management, local congestion issues on the other side. So when we're talking about flexibility, it seems that we're talking about plenty of different things, and there will probably also be different solutions. So I'd be happy to hear what kind of solution, what kind of issues and solution we're talking about in the energy sphere, or in a possible evolution of the current energy markets. And what are we talking about in a possible evolution of congestion management, which I wouldn't say is a market yet, but could become it at a certain point. Want to react?
Yeah, so what we see is that the technology is here. It's been here for a while, and that works. The business models are not mature yet, but they also help to pilot the business models to find out how you can add value to the customers. And also regulation is also an aspect here, of course. So when it comes to how this is developing, we see different technical solutions. We see technical solutions within the DERMS, DERM solutions. So in Nodes, we also see that these DERM solutions can be connected to the open API we have on the platform. So we believe in this open marketplace. That can be facilitate and make the flexibility available. So we believe in open solutions that can be connected. So more of the future is developing towards an ecosystem of platforms, and platforms can talk with different services. And we believe that both from the flexible side and also the grid tools needed from the grid owners is based on platforms that actually can talk together, and the Nodes platform can be there to facilitate those trades.
Thank you. Jan?
If you look at the power system, you will have capacity needs in generation, as traditionally you always have had, which means that you have to balance supply and demand. Will probably more or less be the same in the future. You need flexibility because the supply is going to vary a lot. It's stochastic variation. How do you handle them? It's going to be very interesting to see when we pass 40% renewable, for example. But you also have capacity needs in networks, which is very interesting because that's where the congestion will probably occur. And also probably power quality, the voltage control. How are you going to cope with that without having access to much more flexibility, I would say. So I think it's really the main driver will be the renewables and where they are coming. You will have capacity needs of different time, maybe both at the same time. And how are you going to solve that? So this is going to be much more complex than it is today. And that's why you need probably also market solutions to solve them, like the TSO has solved their, I would say, problems with balancing in their own market for 25 years. And it's very strange to think that the DSO, for example, should manage without his market for solving the problems.
Yeah. You asked the question, what flexibility are we talking about? In my view, we have two axes. So you have the time frame, and then you have the geography. When it comes to time frame, I think it is quite clear, at least that's how we see it, that the closer you can trade, or you can have the possibility to trade flexibility to delivery, the better. And that, of course, is part of the traditional markets, but also will be part of the decentralized markets. And the second axis is the geography. So are we talking of markets at TSO level, DSO level, and then for those also levels, is the topology static or dynamic? That's also another question to answer. I think it's very important. And I think the different solutions we are seeing out there answer the question differently.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add something, Christopher? Then if we are thinking about decentralized markets, for me, then there's a question. There's a good thing about, and at EFED we very much value the liberalized, decentralized markets in the way it's been built as the internal energy market in Europe. If you're going towards local decentralized markets, how do you maintain the benefits of what we've built so far for the energy markets in terms of liquidity, competition, and all this? So how do you make sure that you don't get locked up in either an energy or a congestion management market, which is very small, where there's no competition, insufficient liquidity, and all this? Like, how do we build this? How do we make this circle square, basically? Anybody?
Okay. You want to go? Okay.
If you look at the need for a decentralized market, there's a lot of reasons for a decentralized market. I would say if that's where the resources is located in the future, probably the market should be closer to the resources than it is today. And if these are also where the resources for the TSO will be located in the future, still, it's logical that you could have a market closer to resources and you could integrate it. I would say the most important thing in the future is that any market should serve the power system as a whole, not only one of the players. It has to serve the power system, which means that probably they have to be integrated in some way in the future. But the main difficulties with the existing market is probably it's not taking into account location of the problems. It's probably not taking into account how to define products for the future resources, which are very small and have to be aggregated, located in the decentralized grid, and that means that it's very difficult to integrate into the existing conventional market because you have to change that. How do you modernize the existing centralized market? And if you say it's probably easier to create a new decentralized market and then try to integrate them afterwards, because it's going to be rather complicated, I think, to modernize based on the needs you have for the DSO. The DSO is not connected to the centralized market today. The DSO need tools. And if they need tools, it should be closed and should be part of their own grid. So I think everything, if you look at the needs for this flexibility market, in a way drives the flexibility market to the distributed grid. And in the future, you integrate them. Because I think if you want to serve the whole power system, you integrate them.
I probably would like to add to that your question was, do we really need to fear liquidity? That liquidity will go down. So we're not talking here, I think, when we talk about local flexibility markets, about nodal markets. We talk about some areas which would need to be defined, which are kind of congestion-driven. So if we have today congestions in the grid and we relieve them, how do we do that? There are already mechanisms with monopoly power or market power in it. So we deal somehow in our redispatch and congestion management procedures already today with that. In some markets more with regulated prices, in some others with less regulated prices. So the question is then a local market in that design, will it be increased, or let's say how will be the risk that a market power, which is in any case there because of congestion, even today, will this risk of misuse of market power be larger in a local market for flexibility or in the current system? And I think that needs to be still decided and seen, and it depends on the design of the markets we're going to develop. But my current feeling is, in most cases, it's probably not worse than we have it today.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple of points on this topic of the relationship between traditional markets and future flexibility markets. So I agree with Jens on the fact that there is still already today already a need. So the more you have intermittent renewables, the more you have electrical vehicles, the more you have batteries and storage, the more you have a need of a local flexibility market. And that need is untapped. If we think of the, one example, let's take Germany once again. There you have huge release pass costs already today. I mean, more than a billion, right? And that is not addressed with the current market design and the traditional markets. So that's one point. The second point is, okay, well, when you introduce a flexibility market, you also have to answer the question, which I mentioned at the beginning, what is the relationship between the flexibility market, the new decentralized market, and the traditional market? And there, you need to have a bridge. And in order to avoid also what you mentioned, that can drown liquidity from the established traditional markets.
So what we have seen from pilot installation is actually that the size of the flexibility traded is so small that it doesn't have any market to trade in today. So actually establishing a local marketplace for distributed flexibility opens up a totally new market, utilizing the resources that are already there and actually does not fit into existing markets. So that's also an important part of the market design and the technological platform, that it can be put parameters also on the type of power and how actually the size of it and how it's placed on the marketplace.
I think almost everything has been said, but again, if the local market express the needs that they have transparently, maybe we discussed about innovation this morning, there will be new solutions coming in the market, and so you will not kill the liquidity on the existing one. So I think that's something I say again, the visibility from the DSO, from the system operator, is really key.
So it's really about, we're talking about system operators, and like we see that they also, especially on the distribution side, they're sometimes entering the space of flexibility asset ownership and management sometimes. Right now, we've only talked about system operators as expressing a flexibility need in the system. Do you see system operator, whether at transmission or distribution level, be legitimate actors in the field, or do you think like flexibility, like operating a flexibility asset or service, is just like what we know now in the energy market and should stay in the realm of the competitive system?
I think since the market is liberalized, the role of the system operator is clear. They should remain market facilitators. So to me, they should not enter into the service. They should not enter as service provider, except if, on a moment in time, they express a need, and there is no service coming from that need. In that case, and it's an exceptional case, then they can come with their own solution, their own investment to face the problem that they will have.
I think that this is clarified very clearly in the winter package. I mean, the DSO TSO should participate actively in developing the solutions and use them, but not own and operate them. I think that's the most important. Of course, if there is no commercial solution at all, you have tried, and you have to find a solution. Then you have to come back and cooperate with the regulator how to do it. But I think in most cases, if you go with a bid and you're willing to pay, you will get an offer.
To me, the question is the DSO TSO needed? The answer is both yes and no. So yes, in the sense that they are a central part of the design. You have the flexibility providers, you've got the marketplace, and you've got the grid operators as one of the three essential stakeholders, be them DSOs and DSOs. But I agree with what has been said. I mean, they need to be a different entity from the market operator, so that there's no conflict of interest.
Maybe one last general question before we turn to the audience. We're in our current setup, and there are new technologies, new services that are coming, potentially new platform for flexibility. What needs to be done, whether it's at a technological or regulatory level, to allow those changes to come? We've seen a lot of willingness on the political side or the regulatory side to push forward flexibility and flexible solutions. Yet things emerge at a very slow pace, and especially on the regulatory side, it's the regulatory pace, so it's very slow. So what needs to be changed? And as a second question to that, what are the limits as well? We talked about nodal pricing, and we talked about the clean energy package. When I talk to certain governments about local congestion management, some already see down the line nodal pricing, and they want to avoid it at all costs. So what do we need to change, and how far can we go to enhance the flexibility in the system?
To start with, probably. I think the flexibility markets have two big advantages, or they can solve two problems that we have today that we cannot be managed correctly by the current market platforms. Number one is to get all the small-scale generators and load involved into the market, as we already said, so looking at the distribution grid. That's number one, I think, a very important area for the flexibility markets. The second one is, on the TSO level, we still have a big problem with congestions across borders. So let's say cross-border redispatch, let's call it that way. And I think probably we can use these flexibility markets in the future also to solve that. If you now ask why can't we do it immediately, I think if you start with the distribution grid, we certainly have a problem there from network tariffs. I think that's number one. Network tariff subsidies are an important hurdle to provide flexibility. I think number two is the issue of how to deal with the costs for the primarily DSO. On the TSO solved, it's somehow solved with the redispatch mechanism, but in the DSO area, it needs to be solved. It's a very important regulatory issue how to treat these costs for the DSO. And then if you move further, you would say, well, you also need to have some regulatory provisions or framework for the market as such. We need to provide new schedules or nominations to ensure that it's physically delivered. If you look a bit about cross-border, we need to make sure that cross-border payments are solved. So there's a couple of things that needs to be sorted out, not only on a regulatory, but also on an institutional framework to make it work. But I would probably separate these two things. One is in a country more getting involved at DSO level, and one is in the future probably also used by the TSOs, also in a more European cross-border scale.
I think we are talking about bottom-up development, really, which means that a lot of the technology development is behind the meter. It's really outside the regulatory domain. But on the other side, you have the DSO-TSO, which is inside the regulatory domain. And the most important thing is, on short term, to allow the system operators to participate actively in demonstration projects, and also with money, not only with resources, but with money that can pay the startups or whatever, the innovators, to develop what I think was very important, the relationship between these system operators in the regulatory domain and the service providers that's coming now. This is probably the most important focus, is to open up and enable service providers to come into this decentralized ecosystem, which means that there must be there is a very important change in mindset. If you look at the traditional way with the system operators, it's focusing on costs. It's obligation to serve, really. So it's cost-focused investments. The new mindset is a commitment to optimize, which is showing value. It's using service providers. And how do you show value? You have to work with how to show value in these pilot projects for the DSOs. This is very, very important to get this running, because in a way they are market makers.
I'd like to add one point to the question relationship between nodal pricing and zonal pricing that you mentioned. So in the past, I've been lucky enough to work with Bill Hogan, who was the inventor of the nodal pricing in the US. Having said that, I still believe that we can keep the zonal pricing in Europe, but at the same time, we need to go further down on the geographical axis I was mentioning to tap the local flexibility within the zonal pricing model. So we don't need to change market design at this stage, but we can tackle the problems with experiences and challenges and solutions that can be offered, just the nodes one. Yeah.
Just want to state that the importance of pilots, the collaboration with the regulator and of course the grid operators also. So showing the business cases and showing how the technology can work in practice is really important, and the regulator in the Nordics are really positive to go into pilots and having frequent discussions with us and learn from the experience to formulate the changes in regulations that are coming.
Thank you. We're going to turn to the audience for about 10 minutes, and would be happy to take questions from any of you. I see already a first candidate. Oops.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The others? My name is Paul. I'm coming from Technical University of Catalonia, and I would like to know your view about even smaller scale markets, a market between end users and energy suppliers or aggregators. For instance, people would be incentivized to switch the EV charge from 1 hour to another if the energy supplier is giving the right incentive, right? So that could be, in a sense, being a smaller scale market. That would be, of course, out of the regulatory point of view. It's kind of a internal business between aggregators and end users. But taking the opportunity of that discussion, I would like to know your opinion if that's really necessary, or just put a price for a certain flexibility of my EV and that's it.
So Nodes is a B2B platform, so you have to be a balanced responsible to trade on the platform. So actually, the retail companies or aggregators has to develop those business models that you are addressing at the moment, and I really see that, for example, EV car charging, that you can get new products if you can charge your EV cars to different times, or that you want to get a green guarantee for the power consumed, and so on and so on. So I really think that's an area where it will develop from towards a lot of services towards the customers, which can be priced in different ways. And what we also experience from some of the pilots we have is that paying the customer some cents for the flexibility is not what they're asking, but giving them additional services like some kind of climate system or some technology that they can steer their consumption. That's a motivation to be part. That's also an example. So yes, I really think that this will develop a lot the next years, providing services to customers, and which also can be aggregated to a flexibility in a flexibility market.
Just one small comment. I think there's a lot of pilots already where you have this bilateral trade between the DSOs or TSOs and EV chargers or cars. The main problem is how do you how do you design products from EV cars. How do you take into your mind from the DSO when you really want this as a resource? How do you cooperate with the provider of these services so you create the right type of products that would serve the one who's going to deliver it also? I think that's very important, is look how you design these type of products in the future with close cooperation.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the audience? Hans, yes.
Hello, my name is Beata Polgári. I'm both doing research in market. It's better. I'm doing research, market research, and I'm also doing business development at a utility. And I have two questions. One is more related to the Nord Pool or power exchange and maybe regulation. I'm interested, I know that you have quite complicated orders already, I mean the smart blocks, for example, but I still don't see that they are really enabling what, for example, storage can do. So they can't really use, for example, the ability that they can charge and discharge anytime, but you know, it's related on the state of charge. And I will have a second question. I really liked your point that if you will have the call for offer, you will have an offer finally. But at the utility level, or at least, for example, in Hungary, I don't really see that DSOs are ready to put their congestion call, especially real time or close to real time, to enable flexibility. So I don't see right now, I don't know how you see it in Western Europe, that they can really put their, they could really activate flexibility, and they know where they have congestion, if they have congestion at all. I know the problems of northern German wind power plants and so on, but in many parts of the real network, I don't really see that they are really facing congestion and they can manage it in real time with demand-side management. Thanks. I hope.
Go ahead.
I can take the first question. I've got very good news for you because you mentioned the smart blocks and the fact that they don't address the issue of the needs for storage. And we are working on a product right now, these days, to address that problem. So if you bear with me a few weeks, and you get back to me in the next couple of months, I think you'll have some more details about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably I can answer the DSO question. At least from our experience from the DSOs, we know, yes, they are very active in trying to number one, if they have congestions in their grid, they have to manage it, and they are doing it. The question is how active they are to get new technologies involved and use flexibility markets like nodes. There is probably, and what we discussed it today, even I think the first or second presentation in this morning was regulatory framework. What is the incentive of a DSO to do it? From our experience, I would say many do it, many are active, many try to do pilot projects, and they manage it in real time. If you look at Germany in the south, they manage it on the solar side, and in the north on the wind side, very actively. But to enter into new technologies to avoid investments is a regulatory issue, and that needs to be somehow solved. So it must be attractive for the DSOs to do these intelligent solutions and to earn money with it. And in many jurisdictions, it's not the case today.
Yeah, yes, I would just, yeah, so again, also regarding...
I think...
I'll just answer your question with storage. There is no commercial business model for storage in the energy system today, to be honest, not in general, but there is a lot of special tailored services, for example, purchased by the TSO, where you have frequency regulation, where you can use storage. But again, I think you have to look at how you develop products There is very few products, I haven't probably seen none, where you pair, for example, the storage and the renewables. Why don't you do that to increase the value of storage? But you can see the use of storage from the generators. They very often install storage together with solar and wind themselves at the moment. If you look at the role of the DSO, I think what is needed is a lot of new tools. We call them grid tools. Grid tools, you need to be able to forecast your own congestion, where and how big. If you get that, I think that will be very easy to then have the next step to a market-based role, to be honest. So these also have to be developed by startup or whatever. It's coming.
Yes, just to come back on your congestion point. So it is what I said. Indeed, today it's not transparent at all. We are lobbying for that with the energy company, with EFET and so on. Now we see different examples in France, for instance. They solved, you can find that on the internet, the Ringo project, where the TSO invest in a storage, in a battery to solve congestion. And so there we say, okay, it's maybe a good solution, but if you express your need, the market can answer to that congestion need. On the other side, in UK, I don't have the name of the project in mind, but thanks to the customer there, as you said, the regulatory changed their mind, and they oblige the DSO to publish the flexibility need, and there is the first market for congestion, which is really good.
Yeah, just add a short comment. Part of the product structure in nodes is also what we call availability contracts. That's also is a product for DSO who can buy flexibility in a time frame like 12 months time frame or so. So that's also made so the DSO can plan. It's not like real-time trading.
Thank you very much. We're already running a little bit out of time, so I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd like you to join me in thanking them for this interesting discussion today. We'll continue our morning hub session with a flexibility optimization simulation by Youssef, and they will join us in a few minutes. I see them over there. So many thanks to our panelists of this morning and presenters so far.